First, we need to embrace vulnerability. It's a word that often feels heavy, wrapped in discomfort and fear. We're taught to see vulnerability as a weakness, a crack in the armor that makes us susceptible to pain. But what if, instead, we looked at vulnerability as a doorway, a gateway to a deeper understanding of ourselves? When we're alone, it's natural to feel exposed, like all the layers we use to protect ourselves from the outside world have been peeled away. Suddenly, we're left with just ourselves, without the distractions of busy schedules, social interactions, or the constant hum of technology. It's in these moments of stillness that vulnerability starts to seep in. It whispers to us, asking us to sit with thoughts we might usually push away, to face emotions we've tucked neatly into the background. Embracing vulnerability means giving ourselves permission to be with those feelings, to acknowledge that it's okay to feel uncertain, anxious, or even lonely. It's about accepting that, yes, sometimes being alone can feel like standing on the edge of a vast open space where there are no guarantees and no safety nets. Yet it's in this openness that we can begin to truly understand who we are beneath the surface. This kind of vulnerability is not about oversharing or exposing everything to everyone. It's an internal experience, one that calls for honesty with ourselves. It's sitting in a quiet room with nothing but our own thoughts and choosing to really listen to what our hearts are saying. Maybe it's a voice that has been trying to get our attention for years, whispering the things we've been too busy to hear, the dreams we've set aside, the wounds we've yet to heal, the fears we haven't faced. Vulnerability in this sense is like turning on a light in a dark room. At first, it can be disorienting, even painful, as we confront parts of ourselves we'd rather keep hidden. But as our eyes adjust, we begin to see things more clearly. We notice our strengths as well as our fragilities. We see the parts of us that have been bruised by past experiences, and we learn to hold those parts with tenderness rather than judgment. And it's in these moments of confronting our own truths that we begin to understand that vulnerability isn't something to be feared, it's where real courage lies. It takes courage to sit with discomfort, to acknowledge when we feel unworthy or insecure. It takes courage to accept that sometimes we don't have it all together, and that's okay. Vulnerability invites us to shed the masks we wear for others, and for a moment be fully and unapologetically ourselves. There's a certain beauty in that rawness, in the unpolished version of ourselves that emerges when no one else is around to see it. It's the version of us that doesn't worry about saying the right thing or fitting into a certain mold. It's the version of us that is free to explore our own thoughts and emotions, to ask ourselves the difficult questions, and to answer them with honesty. It's messy, it's uncomfortable, but it's also real, and in that realness we begin to find a sense of belonging, not from others, but from within ourselves. When we embrace vulnerability, we're not turning away from our fears, we're turning toward them, acknowledging them, and letting them be a part of our story. We stop pretending that we need to be perfect or unbreakable to be deserving of our own love. Vulnerability allows us to see that our imperfections don't make us unworthy, they make us human. And in that humanity, we find a connection to ourselves that is deeper and more authentic than any external validation could ever provide. Next, we need to cultivate self-compassion. It's a concept that can feel elusive, especially in a society that often emphasizes productivity, perfection, and comparison. We're taught to push ourselves, to set high standards, and to critique every misstep. But what if we shifted that perspective? What if, instead of being our own harshest critics, we learn to become our own biggest supporters? Self-compassion isn't just about giving ourselves a break or indulging in comforting activities, though those can be a part of it. At its core, self-compassion is about learning to extend the same kindness to ourselves that we would naturally offer to a friend. Think about it, when a close friend is struggling, we don't berate them for their mistakes. We don't tell them they should have done better or that they're not good enough. Instead, we listen, we comfort, and we remind them of their worth. Yet, how often do we extend that same grace to ourselves? When we're alone, there's no one else to cushion the blow of our inner criticism. It's easy for the negative self-talk to become louder, filling the silence with doubts and regrets. We might find ourselves replaying conversations, questioning past decisions, or worrying about the future. In these moments, self-compassion becomes not just a nice idea, but a vital practice. It's about recognizing when we're being too hard on ourselves and choosing a different path, a gentler, kinder path. It starts with recognizing our common humanity, understanding that being imperfect is a shared experience. Every person on this planet has moments of struggle, moments of failure, moments when they feel like they're falling short. When we acknowledge that we're not alone in our imperfections, we start to see them not as flaws, but as part of what makes us human. It allows us to be more forgiving of ourselves, to understand that our worth isn't determined by how flawless our lives appear, but by our capacity to learn, grow, and try again. Self-compassion also invites us to treat our mistakes and struggles with empathy. It's acknowledging that we did the best we could with the knowledge and resources we had at the time. It's recognizing that yes, we have room to grow, but that doesn't make us any less worthy of love and care right now in this moment. It means pausing to ask ourselves, what do I need right now? What would be most nurturing for me? Rather than simply pushing through the discomfort or trying to fix ourselves. It's about softening the internal dialogue, replacing I'm not enough with I'm doing my best and I should have known better with I'm learning as I go. This shift can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if we're used to motivating ourselves through criticism. But self-compassion is not about making excuses or avoiding accountability. It's about creating an internal environment where growth can thrive. It's like tending to a garden. If we want something to grow, we need to nurture it, not tear it down. In moments of solitude, when there's no external feedback to rely on, self-compassion becomes the foundation of our emotional resilience. It's the ability to comfort ourselves when we're feeling low, to remind ourselves that it's okay to struggle, and to hold space for all of our emotions without judgment. It means being patient with ourselves when progress feels slow and celebrating small victories rather than constantly focusing on what still needs to be done. Self-compassion is also about allowing ourselves to feel joy even when things aren't perfect. It's giving ourselves permission to appreciate the small wins, the moments of lightness, the things that make us smile, no matter how small they might seem. It's resisting the urge to withhold kindness from ourselves until we reach a certain goal or meet a particular standard, and instead allowing that kindness to flow freely, even in the midst of imperfection. In the practice of self-compassion, we learn that we don't have to earn our own love. We don't have to prove that we're deserving of care. We are inherently worthy of it simply because we exist, because we're doing the hard work of being human day in and day out. It's a mindset that allows us to feel more at peace with who we are, even when life is uncertain or challenging. It's a way of being that opens the door to a more sustainable kind of happiness. One that isn't reliant on external achievements or validation, but on the quiet, enduring support we offer ourselves. We must learn to redefine connection. When we think of connection, our minds often drift to our relationships with others, the people we talk to, the networks we build, the bonds we nurture. It's a natural association because humans are wired for connection. We long to feel seen, heard, and understood. But in the quest for external connection, we often overlook the most fundamental relationship of all, the one we have with ourselves. Redefining connection means taking a step back from the external world and turning inward. It's about understanding that the quality of our relationship with ourselves shapes how we connect with others. It's easy to believe that happiness lies in being surrounded by people or being constantly engaged in social activities. Yet, even in a crowded room or a lively conversation, we can feel a sense of emptiness if we haven't cultivated that inner connection. Being alone doesn't have to mean feeling lonely, and being with others doesn't necessarily fill the void within. When we spend time alone, we have the opportunity to strip away the roles and expectations placed upon us. We are no longer defined by our job titles, our social circles, or the labels others assign to us. Instead, we come face to face with our authentic selves. It's in these moments that we have a chance to ask deeper questions. Who am I when no one else is watching? What do I truly value? What brings me joy when there's no one else around to validate it? Answering these questions requires a different kind of connection, one that is rooted in self-awareness and self-acceptance. It's about being honest with ourselves, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about recognizing our desires and fears without the need to mask them. This process of self-discovery can feel challenging because it means confronting parts of ourselves that we might have been avoiding. But in doing so, we begin to understand that our worth isn't tied to how many people we know or how often we're invited to events. It's tied to our ability to know ourselves deeply and to be comfortable in our own presence. Redefining connection also involves embracing solitude as a space for reflection and creativity. When we're alone, our minds have the freedom to wander, to dream, to explore ideas that might never surface in the busy noise of daily life. It's in this solitude that we can tap into our own inner wisdom, that quiet voice within us that often gets drowned out by the expectations and opinions of others. We learn to trust our intuition, to follow the threads of our own curiosity, and to find inspiration in unexpected places. This inward connection isn't about becoming self-centered or isolating ourselves from others. It's about creating a strong foundation within ourselves so that when we do reach out to others, we do so from a place of authenticity. We're not seeking validation or using relationships as a way to fill an emotional void. Instead, we're sharing our true selves with others, our strengths, our vulnerabilities, our stories without fear of being judged or misunderstood. When we redefine connection in this way, our relationships with others become richer and more fulfilling. We no longer approach them from a place of neediness or desperation, but from a place of fullness. We realize that connection isn't about how many people are in our lives, but about the depth of the interactions we have. It's about being present in conversations, truly listening without the need to impress, and allowing ourselves to be fully seen by those who matter most to us. This shift in perspective allows us to let go of the pressure to maintain a perfect social life or to constantly be surrounded by people. We understand that solitude doesn't mean there's something wrong with us. It means we're comfortable with who we are. We learn to cherish the time we spend alone, knowing that it gives us the energy and clarity to engage more meaningfully with others when the time comes. Solitude becomes a sanctuary, a place where we recharge, reflect, and reconnect with our core values. In redefining connection, we also come to appreciate the beauty of silence. Silence, which is often seen as a gap to be filled, becomes a companion. It allows us to listen more deeply, not only to the world around us, but to our own thoughts and emotions. It's in this silence that we learn to sit with our discomfort, to understand our patterns of thinking, and to become more aware of the stories we tell ourselves. We start to recognize the difference between the mind's chatter and the deeper truths that reside in our hearts. Redefining connection teaches us that we can be our own source of comfort, that we can hold space for our own emotions, and that we can be enough, just as we are. It's about learning to enjoy our own company, to laugh at our own jokes, and to find contentment in simply being. It's a process that takes time and practice, but it's one that can transform the way we experience both solitude and community. And when we finally understand this, we realize that being alone isn't a state to be feared, but a state to be embraced. Finally, it's important to find joy in the small moments. When we think about happiness, our minds often gravitate toward the big milestones, the promotions, the celebrations, the grand adventures. We wait for the big events that will change everything, believing that those are the moments when happiness will arrive, wrapped up like a gift. But life, in its most beautiful form, is made up of the small, often overlooked moments that happen in between. Learning to find joy in these moments is a powerful way to create a sense of contentment, especially when we're alone. There's a quiet magic in the everyday, a kind of beauty that can only be appreciated when we slow down enough to notice it. It's the way morning light filters through the curtains, casting soft patterns on the walls. It's the simple pleasure of taking a deep breath and feeling the cool, fresh air fill your lungs. It's the warmth of a favorite blanket wrapped around you on a chilly evening, or the comforting ritual of making a cup of tea, watching the steam curl upward as you wait for it to cool. These moments may seem small, almost insignificant, but they have the potential to hold a sense of wonder if we allow ourselves to truly experience them. Finding joy in these moments is about paying attention. It's about being present enough to notice the way the world moves around us. In solitude, without the rush of conversation or the pull of others' expectations, we have the space to be truly mindful. We can tune into the sound of birds outside our window, the rhythm of raindrops tapping on the roof, or the distant hum of city life. Each sound becomes a reminder that we are part of a larger world, even when we are alone. It's a practice of learning to savor, to appreciate what might otherwise go unnoticed in the busyness of life. In these quiet spaces, we have the opportunity to connect with our own senses, to rediscover the simple pleasures that bring us joy. It might be the crisp crunch of leaves underfoot on an autumn walk, or the feeling of warm sunlight on your face as you sit by a window. It could be the taste of a favorite meal, enjoyed slowly, without the rush of time pressing down on you. These sensory experiences, when truly savored, remind us that happiness doesn't have to be a grand affair. It can be found in the gentle pleasures that make life rich and textured, even in solitude. There's also a special kind of joy that comes from engaging with small mindful activities, those that allow us to lose ourselves in the moment. It might be the rhythm of knitting needles clicking together, the soft strokes of a paintbrush across a canvas, or the quiet satisfaction of putting together a puzzle piece by piece. These activities have a way of grounding us, of bringing us fully into the present. They remind us that joy isn't always about achieving something or reaching a destination. Sometimes it's about immersing ourselves in the process, in the act of creation, in the feeling of flow that comes when time seems to melt away. Finding joy in the small moments is also about cultivating gratitude. It's about noticing what we have rather than focusing on what's missing. When we learn to appreciate the ordinary, we begin to see that these little moments are actually quite extraordinary. It's recognizing the delight in a quiet morning when the world is still waking up, or the peace that comes from sitting in a cozy corner with a good book. It's realizing that these moments, no matter how small, are worth holding on to. Gratitude invites us to see our lives through a lens of abundance, even when we are alone, because it shifts our focus from what we lack to what we already have. It's a mindset that requires us to slow down, to step away from the constant hustle and instead lean into a gentler pace. In a culture that often equates busyness with worthiness, this can feel like an act of rebellion. It asks us to resist the urge to fill every moment with noise and activity, and instead to embrace the quiet. It's in that quiet that we can hear the sound of our own heartbeat, feel the rhythm of our own breath, and remember that there is beauty in simply being. It's a reminder that life doesn't always have to be loud to be meaningful, that there is richness in simplicity. When we find joy in the small moments, we start to realize that these experiences are not filler, they are the fabric of life itself. It's the moments of laughter that escape unexpectedly when you're watching a favorite movie for the 100th time, or the satisfaction of tidying up a space and seeing it transformed. It's the joy of witnessing a sunset, the colors changing moment by moment, knowing that this beauty exists whether anyone is there to see it or not. It's a smile at the memory of a past adventure, or a feeling of contentment that comes from knowing you've made it through another day, however ordinary it might seem. These moments teach us to cherish the present, to understand that happiness isn't something we need to chase, it's something we can find right where we are. It's a practice of looking for the little sparks of joy, even on days when things don't go as planned, or when the weight of loneliness feels heavier than usual. It's about remembering that happiness doesn't have to be complex sometimes. It's as simple as a quiet moment of connection with the world around us, or a gentle recognition of the good that exists in our own lives, even when things feel imperfect. It's in these moments that we find a sense of peace, a reminder that we don't need to wait for some future event to feel whole. As we navigate the journey of learning to be happy alone, we come to understand that true contentment doesn't rely on external factors, it grows from within. Embracing vulnerability allows us to be honest with ourselves, to sit with our truths without fear. Cultivating self-compassion teaches us to be gentle with our imperfections, offering ourselves the same kindness we would extend to others. Redefining connection shifts our focus inward, helping us recognize the value of our own company and the importance of being at peace with who we are. And by finding joy in the small moments, we learn that happiness can be found in the everyday, in the quiet rhythms of life that often go unnoticed. In solitude, we find the space to grow, to reflect, and to reconnect with our own hearts. And as we embrace this path, we begin to realize that being alone doesn't mean being incomplete. It means discovering the fullness of our own presence. It's a journey of resilient self-discovery and quiet strength, one that leads us to a deeper sense of fulfillment and a happiness that is truly our own. Another important step is to practice mindful presence. Mindfulness is often misunderstood as just a meditation practice or a buzzword for relaxation, but it goes much deeper than that. It's about fully inhabiting each moment, even the seemingly mundane ones, without being swept away by thoughts of the past or worries about the future. It's the art of anchoring ourselves in the here and now, of giving our undivided attention to whatever we're doing, no matter how small or ordinary it might seem. When we practice mindfulness, we invite ourselves to be more in tune with our bodies, our breath, and our surroundings. It's taking a few moments to notice how your feet feel on the ground or how the breeze brushes against your face. It's about experiencing the sensation of water as it runs over your hands when you wash the dishes, or truly tasting the food you eat without rushing through the meal. These small acts of presence become a form of meditation, a way to bring our wandering minds back to the present. Mindfulness is especially powerful when we are alone, because it allows us to be with ourselves without the constant pull of external distractions. We can listen to our thoughts without judgment, observe our emotions without rushing to change them, and notice how our bodies respond to different situations. It's a practice of noticing, of being a gentle observer of our own experience. And in doing so, we come to realize that every moment, even the quiet and solitary ones, contains its own richness. Mindful presence helps us to break free from the stories our minds often tell us, stories that say we should be doing more, achieving more, or that we need to be with others to be truly happy. It encourages us to slow down and appreciate the simplicity of just being. It teaches us that peace can be found in the space between breaths, that joy can be uncovered in the act of simply existing. And as we become more comfortable with being present, we start to see that each moment holds something unique, something worth savoring, even when we're on our own. In times of solitude, we have a unique opportunity to explore our passions. Life is often so full of obligations and responsibilities that we forget to nurture the things that make our hearts sing. But when we find ourselves alone, we're given the space to rediscover what truly lights us up. It's a chance to ask ourselves, what am I genuinely curious about? What activities make me lose track of time? What would I do if I wasn't worried about anyone else's opinion? Exploring our passions means giving ourselves permission to dive into what excites us without needing to be good at it or achieve something with it. It might be learning to play an instrument, trying your hand at painting, or picking up a new language. It could be as simple as rediscovering a love for reading or cooking a meal from scratch, just because it brings you joy. It's about pursuing these interests for their own sake, for the pleasure they bring, rather than as a means to an end. When we invest time in the things we love, we create moments of flow, those times when we are so absorbed in an activity that we forget about everything else. It's in those moments that we feel most connected to ourselves, most alive. And the beautiful thing about pursuing our passions alone is that it allows us to connect with our own creativity and curiosity without the pressure to perform or impress others. It's a gift we give ourselves, a way of saying that our joy and fulfillment matter. In exploring our passions, we also learn to appreciate the process rather than just the outcome. We realize that it's not about being the best or turning our hobbies into something productive. It's about the joy that comes from engaging with something that sparks our interest. It's about the freedom to create, to experiment, and to play, knowing that this time spent with ourselves is valuable in its own right. Solitude is also a chance to build resilience, to strengthen our emotional and mental muscles so that we can face life's challenges with a greater sense of inner stability. When we spend time alone, especially during difficult times, we confront our own thoughts and emotions without the buffer of others' opinions or distractions. This can be challenging, but it's also incredibly powerful. It's in these moments that we learn how strong we truly are. Resilience isn't about being unaffected by hardship or pretending that everything is fine. It's about learning to sit with discomfort, to acknowledge our feelings without being overwhelmed by them. It's about understanding that difficult emotions like sadness, frustration, and fear are not signs of weakness, but natural responses to life's ups and downs. Resilience allows us to face these feelings head on, to let them wash over us without being swept away. As we spend time alone, we learn how to soothe ourselves, how to find comfort in our own presence. We develop coping mechanisms that don't rely on others, discovering the practices that bring us back to center when life feels chaotic. It might be journaling to process our thoughts, practicing deep breathing to calm our minds, or simply going for a walk to reconnect with the world outside. These moments of self-care become acts of resilience, ways of telling ourselves that we have what it takes to weather the storms. Building resilience through solitude also helps us to cultivate a sense of inner trust. We come to believe that we can handle whatever comes our way, that we have the resources within us to navigate both the good times and the hard times. It's about knowing that even when we're alone, we are never truly without support, because we've learned how to support ourselves. Lastly, it's essential to appreciate your own company. We often think that being alone means missing out, that it's a sign of a lack or a void to be filled. But what if instead we saw it as an opportunity to become our own best friend? What if we learned to treat ourselves with the same respect, care, and kindness that we would offer to a loved one? Appreciating your own company means learning to enjoy the time you spend with yourself. It's about letting go of the idea that you always need someone else to have a good time. It's realizing that you can laugh at your own thoughts, find joy in your own quirks, and take yourself on little adventures, whether it's visiting a new place, trying a new recipe, or simply taking a stroll through the neighborhood. It's in these moments that we discover the freedom that comes with solitude. We can follow our own rhythm, listen to our own desires, and make choices without needing to consider anyone else's needs or expectations. It's a time to be selfish in the best possible way, to prioritize what makes us happy, and to explore who we are when there's no one else around. In learning to appreciate our own company, we come to realize that we are enough, that we are worthy of joy and peace, even when no one else is there to see it. This doesn't mean that relationships aren't important or that we don't need others in our lives, but it does mean that we don't have to depend on others for our sense of fulfillment. It's about finding a balance where we can enjoy being with others, but also cherish the time we spend alone. It's about recognizing that the relationship we have with ourselves is just as valuable as any other relationship we build. Learning to be happy alone is not about shutting others out or isolating ourselves from the world. It's about discovering that our worth and happiness don't rely solely on external factors. It's about embracing vulnerability, cultivating self-compassion, and redefining what connection means. It's about finding joy in the small moments, practicing mindful presence, exploring our passions, building resilience, and appreciating our own company. When we learn to find peace and contentment within ourselves, we become whole, not because we have everything, but because we know how to cherish what we already have. And in that wholeness, we find a deep and abiding sense of freedom, one that allows us to navigate life with grace, whether we are surrounded by others or standing alone.